welcome everybody. We have got a lot of people signed up, but I also know what it's like as a parent carer, and there are other things that get in the way. So we will continue and people can be let in one by one. So welcome to this online session on exam preparation. My name is Jane Ring. I'm the Look Parent Carer Support Officer. For those who are new to Look, and actually we've got quite a few people signed up who are new, we're a small national charity. We say small but mighty, whose ambition is to enable vision impaired young people to thrive. And my job as part of it is to make sure families feel supported and connected and have their voices heard. So I am a parent carer of a visually impaired child. She's also deaf. She's 14, and I have experienced a lot of the things I'm sure you have as well. We have my colleague on the line as well. So Sid is in the background. She's one of our amazing mentor officers. Mentoring is one of the major things we do to make sure that visually impaired young people are connected and have role models to talk to. Lacey and Amber are on the call, and they're both mentors, and they both support and have partnerships, which is exciting. Lara is one of our newest mentors, so it's great that she's joined us today. And we have Simon and Jane, who are coming to share their knowledge and wisdom about exam preparation. We have a space, so I sent you all kind of the running order, so we have space for questions. So what we'll do is Simon's got a very detailed presentation. He's taken into account your questions, so he's going to do, hopefully I'll be able to answer quite a lot, and then pass on to Jane, and then there will be a time for questions, and then we'll hear from our lovely mentors. One of them's not quite here yet. He's a very busy man. But he's arriving just after 8, so Azim will be here later. So that's my blurb. I really hope you find this session useful. We have been planning it for a little time. It has absolutely come from the need of parents that come to my support group talking about the concerns they have for their young people and the inequalities they see sometimes. So it's really great that Simon and Jane are here to try and allay some of those fears and explain how RNIB and VIEW are working within the sector. So I shall be quiet, and I will actually turn my camera off as well. And we will hear from Simon first. Thank you, Simon. Are you happy to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me in, and thank you very much for the pleasure of talking at the Look UK exams event. I am going to just start sharing my PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Right. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. And my name's Simon Kerrigan. I'm an education specialist. I work at RNIB. Until recently, I was a lead teacher at an integrated resource for children and young people with vision impairment in a large secondary school, mainstream secondary school in Sheffield, where we supported students with a severe visual impairment from across Sheffield. I've also contributed towards the yearly RNIB exam update day, which provides information for QTVIs to help prepare students for exams. And as part of that, I've written something called the exams calendar, which helps to guide QTVIs through the exams process and help them prepare students for exams. Now I'm working at RNIB and hopefully leading to improve provision for children and young people with vision impairment. In this talk, I'm going to talk about key dates for exams. So key dates for GCSE exams, A-level exams and SATs exams. I'll talk about the modified formats that are available as standard for Key Stage 3, Key Stage 2 SATs, GCSEs and A-level exams as well. I'll show you how to access past papers in modified format for all of those exams as well. And then I'll talk a little bit about exam access arrangements, how a school or college might implement these in the normal way of working for a student. And then finally, I'll look at preparation for exams and hopefully try and answer as many of the questions that were asked in the lead up to this webinar So things about revision guides, access to revision guides, access to revision sites, calculators to be used in exams and things like that as well. I'll finish off with a bit of a case study, which was, it's a couple of years ago now. It was a case study of 2 GCSE students at Tapton who were supported in the integrated resource, just to show how the process can work for preparing for exams and then the exams process, the actual exams at the end as well. I have sent a resource booklet which includes all the key information from this presentation. So it's got the key dates in there. It's got explanation of formats, so for GCSEs, A-levels and SATs exams, an explanation of all the formats that are available. It's also got links to the past papers for these. I've just put that together this morning, so all those links should work. It is a slightly different process of downloading past papers from each of the exam boards. So I'll quickly go through how to download all those past papers. There's also links to accessible revision guides in there as well. And then there's some information on revision sites, making revision sites accessible, and calculators and things that can be used in exams. I have tried to answer as many, Jane and I have tried to answer as many questions in the presentations that we're going to do that have been asked in the lead up. Unfortunately, we can't answer about individual cases during this webinar, but if you do want some help or advice, then contact RNIB. The email address is on the page now. It's cypf@rnib.org.uk. I will repeat this at the end of the presentation as well. Okay, so the first slide that I have this is actually represented in your resource booklet as a calendar. So it's a timeline on here, but it's a calendar in your resource booklet, just to show some of those key events that take place throughout the year, whether it's SATs exams or GCSE exams or A-level exams that your children are taking. So the first, well, this is a deadline that's actually happening in schools and colleges at the moment. So schools will be ordering their modified papers using something called access arrangements online. So they'll be ordering modified large print papers, Braille papers for GCSE and A-level exam papers, for A-level exams. That's for the summer 2023 exams. The deadline dates, these deadline dates have changed over the last few years with COVID. But the deadline date to apply for access arrangements, other access arrangements, is 21st of March. The exams series for the summer GCSE and A-level exams take place from the 15th of May and then finish around the 30th of June. The exams around 15th of May tend to be the language exams, and then some of the A-level exams are the later ones in that series. The Key Stage 2 SATs, they will take place from Tuesday the 9th of May 2023 till Friday the 12th of May. So there's different SATs exams on each of those days. So it's from Tuesday to the Friday of that week. And then finally, results days, A-level results day is 17th of August, and then GCSE results day is on the 24th of August. So this document, this is all the modified large print and the enlarged papers that are available for A-level and GCSE exams. I'll go through each of these just to explain a little bit about them. There is an explanation for each of these in your resource booklet, and this is on the handout, page 2 of the handout that I've sent out. So the enlarged, first of all, the unmodified A3 unmodified enlarged paper. So that unmodified enlarged paper is the standard paper. The school or college would order that. They don't send an actual paper out, but the school or college is allowed up to 90 minutes early opening in order to copy that paper onto A3, which would give roughly 14 points in A3, but unmodified. The diagrams won't be modified, it'll be enlarged to A3. The school or college can also print the paper onto coloured paper. I know that was one of the questions, can a student have a coloured paper? Yes, they can. The school would apply for early opening, and then they're able to print that paper onto coloured paper. The modified large print papers, so A3 and A4 modified large print papers, these they're modified, so the layout is simplified to remove any visual complexity, but also maintain the same level of difficulty as the paper, the standard papers. Pictures and things like that might be removed or made more accessible, removing visual clutter, They add picture descriptors to things like history papers and the English language papers. There's a descriptor for pictures in there. Graphs and charts might be made larger. There is a disclaimer on these just to say that even if you order an A4 paper, it might be that some charts and graphs will need to be displayed on A3. So just bear in mind, even if you've ordered one of the A4 18-point or A4 24-point bold papers, there may be some of those charts on A3 paper, just in order to actually fit the information onto the paper. These modified large print papers are available in A4 18-point, A4 24-point, and A3 24-point, A3 36-point. If the format that you need is not available, under reasonable adjustments, the school or college can make an application to the exam boards to produce a more bespoke format. A reasonable adjustment would be a reasonable cost to produce those, reasonable time frame, and maintaining the integrity and security of the papers. This tends to be just an exceptional circumstances. Normally, if you wanted, for example, a paper in 22-point, then they would recommend that you prepare the student and you use past papers at 24 and order the 24-point, and use the closest available format above the font size that is generally used. The papers are also available in grade 2 Braille. Grade 2 Braille is a standard, but you can request, the school can request uncontracted grade 1 Braille. So both are available, but a separate request needs to be made by the school to order the grade 1 papers. Large print papers can also be ordered with tactile diagrams. All the exam boards also offer non-interactive PDFs. These are non-interactive because they're not write-on. You can't write on the actual paper. Obviously, if you're using these with a type of screen reader, they need to be trialed before with the screen reader that you use, so JAWS or NVDA. These are all downloadable from the exam board websites in PDF format, and I'll show you how to download those a little bit later on. The reason why they're in PDF is to maintain the integrity of the paper. So Word often displays differently on different types of laptops and can be editable as well. So they send these out in Word. Pearson actually have started to produce, Pearson EdXL have started to produce some editable, which they call interactive PDFs. So PDFs that you can use with a screen reader, but you can also write in the correct font size on the paper. And I think some of the other exam boards are starting to move that way as well. In terms of SATs exams, so Key Stage 1 SATs exams, the standard paper is 15-point, and there is one modified large print available. It's in 18-point, so that would be sent out to the school or the centre. Any further modifications that need to be made to these would need to be made by the VI service or the school. The school can apply for between 1 day and 5 days early opening to make those modifications. You can also order grade 1 Braille papers for the Key Stage 1 SATs. For Key Stage 2 SATs, the regular paper, the standard paper is in 12-point. The modified large print paper would be in 18-point with 24-point for emphasized text. So 18-point is the only the modified large print paper that's available. Again, if further modifications need to be made to these, then the VI service or school would need to make those. So they would apply for 5 days early opening. 5 days is the maximum amount that the Standards and Testing Agency will give. So 5 days early opening, and then the school or centre need to make those modifications for in order for those papers to be sat. Obviously, they need to be made in secure conditions and then transported securely to the school, and they're locked away in the school cabinet before the school take those exams. So these are the papers that are available for the Key Stage 2 SATs. The Key Stage 2 is also available in large print. This is, again, just a photo enlargement from the 12-point to 14 or 15-point onto A3 paper. And they're available in contracted or uncontracted Braille. I have put this link in the resource document that I handed out. There's a link to access all the modified large print past papers for SATs exams. They offer all the modified large print papers that were produced those years, and they also have Braille transcripts on the website for the 2018, 2019 and 2022 exam series for the Key Stage 2 SATs. For the GCSE and A-level past papers, I've put together a table in the resource document. Each of these links I've just put in this morning. So these are the specific links to the pages where the modified past papers are. And it's a different way to access every single one. So I've put a little bit, the final column on there is any other details. So it tells you how to download each of those papers from that particular exam board website, because they are all different. Some will, you'll do a search with the rest of the standard papers, and then there'll be the modified papers will be in a zip file at the bottom of the page. I think that's true for OCR. For AQA, there's a separate page for modified papers where you can download those modified papers. Just a point for a few of these exam boards, AQA and Pearson do this. They only actually list on their website, they only have to download the 18.A4 and the 36.A3 papers. This is not to say that 24 point are not available, but the 36.A3 papers reduced to A4 would give that 24.A4 paper. And the 18.A4 enlarged to A3 would give 24 point on A3 paper. So they only actually save 18.A4, 36.A3, and you photo reduce or photo enlarge to get those 24 point papers. I know one of the questions that was asked in the lead up was about not making the 24 point available. They expect centres to photo reduce or photo enlarge them, and they only save, or some of the exam boards only save those 18 point and 36 point papers. The access arrangements that are available. So in terms of access arrangements, the JCQ states that access arrangements should be, you should make an application for these at the start of the course. So a GCSE student, you'd normally make these access arrangements at the start of year 10. They will then last throughout the whole of that course. So as long as the student is at the same institution studying and doing the same level of qualification, then those access arrangements will stay throughout. So even if there are year 10 exams and then year 11 exams, they don't need to reapply for those access arrangements. That also enables the centre and the QTVI and the SENCO to establish the normal way of working with the student and what will be accessible within the exam. So they're working in the style that they will work when it comes to the exam. So it's a 2-year process, and actually a lot of centres will start this process. They'll start the normal way of working from year 7 for GCSEs and implement that normal way of working throughout the time at the school with all internal exams and all mock exams and things like that. The QTVI will assess the student along with the SENCO to decide upon those access arrangements. So for example, things like the amount of extra time that they might need. You can still, I know this is a question that just came in today, you can still gain top marks even when using access arrangements. These access arrangements do not reduce the number of marks that you can get in an exam. You can still get top marks. The only thing which would affect a mark would be if a student is using a scribe and there are SPAG marks, spelling and grammar marks for a particular question, then they wouldn't have access to those spelling and grammar marks unless the student dictates the spellings and punctuation things specifically to the scribe. And then the scribe would write that on the cover page and then they would have access to those spelling and grammar marks. But there's nothing which stops them getting other marks just by using access arrangements in an exam. I've put these access arrangements into an order. So the ones at the top of the list there are seen as the kind of the lower risk ones from exam boards. So these, the supervised rest breaks and word processor, a centre would not need to make an application for those, but they would need to keep any evidence of need just to, when JCQ inspectors come in, just to show why, to show what access arrangement they have. The middle block, which is extra time up to 25%, computer reader or human reader, scribe and speech to text. The school would apply for these on access arrangements online. The student would hopefully work with their scribe or reader to build a relationship with them and know exactly what they can ask the scribe to do and what they can ask the reader to do. There are lists of notes for a scribe and notes for a reader in the JCQ access arrangements and reasonable adjustments document that tell them exactly what they can do. So it's a kind of a process of working with the scribe or reader in advance of the exams so that they're familiar with what they can do in an exam. The two at the bottom of the list there, the extra time over 25% and practical assistant, the school or centre would make an application on access arrangements online for these access arrangements, and then they'd need to get into a conversation with the exam board to say specifically what the practical assistant would be assisting with in the exam. And it can't be a practical exam. So if the student is gaining marks for something that's practical, then the practical assistant couldn't help with those type of things. So really guidance needs to be in place before, if there's a practical exam, looking at whether the student can access all aspects of that exam. Finally, this is really about the process of exams and access to revision resources. So trying to answer as many of the questions we had in the lead up to this webinar. Revision guides, publishers will make revision guides available, electronic revision guides, to schools or VI services. RNIB Bookshare do have a lot of these revision guides available, and they've so to save people having to ask the publisher for them. For some students, these might be usable as they are on an iPad or an Android tablet. For other students, you can use apps like Dolphin Easy Reader, which you can modify text size, text font type, background color, text color, and have the text read out. There's other apps as well, things like what else is there? There's Dolphin Easy Reader. There's Voice Dream Reader is another one as well that can be used to actually read these back. VI services can also make further modifications to these and then give them to the student. I would say these are quite time consuming. So if a subject is using a revision guide, or if you wish a revision guide to be produced, make sure they're given to the VI service well in advance so they have plenty of time. And even have the human resources written into an EHCP so that these resources can be made. Custom Eyes, which I think is it's a guide dogs site, they will produce bespoke revision guides in a particular font size. They do need some time to produce them, and it's for, I think, the recommended retail price for the particular book. So the links to all of these things are in the resource notes that I've handed out as well. Online revision sites, well, if a school is using an online revision site, something like Caboodle, I think, is used for science and maths, then alternatives need to be made available, really, so that the children and young people with visual impairment are able to access these revision resources. Some of them can work with access technology, with iPads. So it might be that the school or the QTVI wants to work with the student to develop their skills in accessive technology so that they can access these websites independently. A lot of apps have ways of actually viewing these revision sites, and also the inbuilt accessibility settings will help students to access them. If it's still not accessible, the revision information, then centres or VI services can modify the text and then produce it for the student. But again, plenty of advance notice is needed for that. In terms of calculators, calculators are allowed in exams. Calculators on iPads or on Android devices are allowed in exams. They would need to be put in restricted access in order to be used in exams. It's probably a process of working the QTVI, working with the classroom teachers to decide which is the most appropriate calculator to use in a particular exam, and then working with the QTVI to make sure that they've downloaded it onto their iPad or Android device, and then they're able to lock it to that to use in an exam. As a last resort, it is possible for a student to instruct a practical assistant, which the school can apply for, to press the buttons on a calculator and then have a reader to read out the result. Other calculators are allowed in exams as well, so talking calculators and things like that. There is a podcast. It was a NatSip and View podcast in November 2021. There's myself and another two QTVIs who were talking about accessible apps on the iPad. There's a link in this presentation. There's also a link in the notes, and there's a section in there about online calculators and calculators that can be used in exams. Okay. So this is just a bit of a video really to show you how the process of applying for exams and actually implementing exam access arrangements and large print papers and things works in practice.
Hello, I'm Liz Williams. I'm a teacher of the visually impaired at Tapton School, and I've been here for a number of years. I've got overall responsibility for the exams for the visually impaired children. At Tapton, the exams are done quite formally from year 7 right through to A levels. So we start from, straight away with the pupils to make sure that they're used to the different formats available for visually impaired pupils from the exam board. At year 7, we give the pupils a lot more support to access the braille and the large print exams. And then as they get older, we withdraw that support. So a lot of them will be independent by the time they get to their GCSEs.
Once the needs of the individual have been assessed and identified, you're able to order a range of adapted papers from the exam board. For students with more severe visual impairments, large print modified papers are available in size 18 and size 24 font. The size 18 modified papers are on A4 paper and the size 24 are on A3. These are modified, they're not just an exact copy. The questions have been adapted to improve visual access to them. Papers are also available in grade 1 and grade 2 braille with tactile diagrams.
I'm Jerry. I'm in year 11 at Tapton School and I'm doing my GCSEs. I have nystagmus, and in class day to day I use an iPad to access the board and the worksheets. In the exams I have large print, preferably on A4, but at the minute I can only get it on A3, which makes it difficult. In exams I get extra time because of my nystagmus, which means it's harder to read the questions. I type my answers on the laptop because it's easier to read than my own handwriting. And for a calculator I use the iPad.
From coming in at year 7, we monitor the children doing the exams over the 5 years prior to GCSEs, and so we get an idea of how much time they need, a reasonable amount of time to complete exams, which is the best rooms for them to be in terms of lighting, whether or not they still need the practical help or a reader or a scribe. I discuss with the exams officer then what will be reasonable adjustments to get them the access arrangement that they'll need as an individual.
My name is Pete Traynor. I am the exams officer here at Tapton Secondary School in Sheffield.
My name is Vanessa Bell and I'm exams manager at Tapton School, Sheffield. We liaise with Senko and Vision Support and then apply for the appropriate modified paper on the online access arrangement site. This has to be done by the end of January to ensure we receive the papers in good time.
In addition to their modified papers, some students may require further support. This can range from extra time for that particular student, which can range from 25% up to 100%. This is entirely dependent on the individual needs of that student, and we would have looked into this and had that approved beforehand. On top of this, they may require further support, which could come in sort of human form from members of staff, such as members of the visual support department, who would act as reader, scribe or prompt to help the student more effectively carry out their exam paper.
Another format that's available is electronic format. It's important that you've practiced this style of paper in advance to make sure that the PDF format is compatible with any access technology that's used by that student. It's important for any of these types of papers that you have familiarised them with that type of format so that that then becomes their usual way of working and they're aware of that and they're familiar with it when they go into their real exam. You've
got to be flexible yourself in what you'll finally accept, but I do find the exam boards quite helpful, and will enter a dialogue to discuss how they can, how we can both meet the needs of the pupil.
I'm Yanko Georgiev. I am a student in Year 11 at Tapton Secondary School. For my exams, the access arrangements that I have include extra time, which is 80% extra, a reader to come with me in the exam so they can show me around the tactile diagrams, which are in Braille because I can't see the print version of them, a Braille paper, which I have because I can't read the print version, so I can read it. My Braille paper is grade 1 Braille, which is uncontracted Braille. I practice in advance for my exams. I write my answers on a laptop on a Word document which has speech software on. All those arrangements make me feel confident. I feel that I can achieve all my potentials in my exams which I may.
In order for the student to reach their full potential, you have to know the student as an individual and their normal way of working. You also need to know what's available from the exam board, what you can reasonably ask for on behalf of that pupil, and that way marry the pupil's normal way of working with the best access arrangements for them as an individual, and then they will have the best chance of getting the best mark possible in the exam. For more information, visit rnib.org.uk/exam access.
RNIB, supporting people with sight loss.
Okay, since this video was made, the 24.A4 papers have been made available by all the exam boards, and 36.A3 papers have been made available as well. But it just gives you an idea of how things work across an exam series for students. I did notice in the chat as well, somebody was asking about Braille past papers and about Braille revision guides. The exam boards will make Braille past papers available to centres, to schools, and RNIB are actually doing some work now with if there are no Braille papers available for a particular exam, looking at making Braille papers available that weren't produced for a live series. So we're doing some work with the exam boards on that at the moment. Also, revision guides are available in Braille. There are some that are hosted by RNIB, Bookshare, and the links to those are on the resource document that I handed out. My advice, I know we're doing some questions afterwards after Jane's presentation as well. My advice really is just to work with the school, work with the QTVI. It can be a stressful time for children and young people doing exams. Be calm, be reassuring. If there is any help that you need, any specific advice or help that you need, then the email is on the page. It's on it's cypf@rnib.org.uk, and it's also in the resource notes that I handed out. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. I just want to check, because there's been loads of questions come in. Should we go on to Jane? Will some of them, do you think, be answered through Jane's presentation anyway, and have the questions afterwards? Yeah,
I think so.
So don't worry, everyone, we will get round to your questions, and I'd like to introduce you to Jane now from View. Thank you for being here, Jane.
No problem. No, thank you very much for inviting me. So I'm going to just talk about a few things, maybe in a bit more detail than Simon did, but my presentation is, relatively speaking, pretty low tech. So my name's Jane Sharp. I'm a QTVI, and I'm also chair of View. So some of you might know about View. View is the professional association for the vision impairment workforce. So a lot of our members are QTVIs and teaching assistants, the people who work with your students at school. So our aim is to support your students by supporting the staff that work with them. So I'm also an accredited modifier for science exams, so JCQ accredited modifier. So I've got quite a lot of experience in modifying exam papers. So that's going to be something that I'm going to talk to you about. Okay, so I thought it would be useful to have a look at exam modification, because Simon mentioned that some of the papers are modified for large print or for Braille, and the students really benefit from getting used to these modifications if they can have plenty of practice on questions and practice papers that have been modified in the same way that the live papers will be, so they know what to expect on the day of their exam. So it's really important for schools and colleges to get hold of some genuine past papers, but once they've seen how they're modified, and there's some guidance which I'll be mentioning as well that they can follow, they should be able then to produce resources in-house that kind of match the live papers. So they might be modifying in like just little class tests. Some teachers take questions from past papers, but not the whole paper. So they might do individual questions, and some tests will not have been requested in the format that the student wants at the time those exams were live. So the exam boards or producers won't actually have those available in the modified format. So schools or colleges would need to make their own in that case. So I'm not going to try and go through how you modify absolutely everything that's on a paper, but I thought it might be useful if I just chose one element. So I decided to choose what I thought was the hardest, which is how to modify graphics. So when you're modifying graphics, and what I mean by graphics on an exam, it can be anything from a photograph to a drawing, diagrams, maps, charts, graphs, anything like that. We'll just call them all graphics. The overriding principle is to modify it according to how it's going to be used to answer the question. And for this reason, you need a subject specialist who is also a QTVI to decide how every individual graphic should be adapted. Now, in one school or one college, you won't have a whole team of QTVIs who specialise in all the subjects that you need. So a common arrangement for in-house materials is for the QTVI to work with the subject teacher on modification. For anybody who isn't a JCQ modifier, which would be most QTVIs, there is guidance, as well as looking at genuine past papers. There's a very detailed document produced by UCAF, that's the UK Association of Alternative Formats, and it's called the Best Practice Guidance for Modifiers and Producers. And within that, there are some guidelines on modifying graphics, and it suggests a number of options. So these are only guidelines because, as I said, everything has to be modified to make it suitable for the particular question that it refers to. So one of your options is to replace an original drawing, photograph, diagram with a clearer one. So this might be a strategy that you use if, say, you've got a photograph of something and its only purpose really is to cue the candidate into what the question is about, a sort of topic area. They don't really need to get anything from the diagram. You might just replace that with something a little bit clearer. You might redraw the diagram and take out any extraneous detail, make the key features clearer. And this is what has been done to the example on the slide. So we've got a 3D diagram of some science equipment, and the modified large print version has got a 2D version of that diagram, and also some of the finer details been taken out. And a diagram on a Braille paper would be fairly similar, not identical, but fairly similar to the modified large print one there, but obviously with Braille labels, and some different textures would be used to make sure that the different elements are clear from each other. Another option the guidance suggests that you might want to consider is using a model instead of a diagram. They're quite often used on maths papers. Another option is to add a written description to aid interpretation of a diagram. So Simon mentioned history. So he's obviously psychic because he knew that I would have an example of that. So on this one, the historical source is clearly a very inaccessible diagram. It's a line drawing, probably looks like it's been taken from a newspaper or something. So very, very inaccessible. But what's been done is that the little bit of text that's been given on the standard paper, that's been expanded to give more information on the modified large print paper. The diagram's been left in on this one. There might be some students who have enough vision to just get an idea of what it shows, or at least recognise it as something that they've come across in class, because you know, we need to remember that students don't go into the exams cold. They have studied this subject in detail before. But actually, everything that they need to answer the question, along with what they've learned in class, is in the text. So even if they can't see enough to get much out of that diagram, it doesn't matter because the information is in the text there. Another option would be to replace the diagram entirely with a written description and just get rid of that. If you've got a chart or a graph, there are some standard adaptations in the guidance, for example, removing minor grid lines, but modification is carried out on a case-by-case basis, because the graph that you end up with, or the chart that you end up with, has to be able to allow the student to answer the question. So although you follow the guidelines as closely as possible, sometimes you have to do it slightly differently. Another sort of singular case is where you get questions that involve measuring or drawing. So the UCAF guidance there reminds modifiers that the modified diagram should allow for the use of large print rulers and protractors. So in 2016, RNIB published a report which raised some concerns over the quality of modified papers, and they called in there for producers. So these are the people that exam boards use to make the papers. They called for producers to have more regard for the UCAF guidance. And the UCAF guidance states that all modified papers should be proofread. And it's very clear in that guidance that proofreading of Braille papers should be done by a touch reader. However, errors still get through. So what can be done? Well, there's something called the special consideration process that schools and colleges can use if something goes wrong in the exam. So for example, an error on the paper. So the initial step that the candidate would take would be to bring the error to the attention of the invigilator, who will then inform the exams officer, who will then decide what the appropriate action is to take. Quite often this is getting the subject teacher, if the QTVIs on site, they might ask them as well, and they try and solve the problem there and then and see if it is a genuine error. They'll also try and reduce the impact on the student at that moment in time so that they can carry on with the exam. And then after the exam, if they all consider that the student has been significantly disadvantaged, then the school or the college will apply for special consideration. So not only does this serve to ensure the candidate isn't penalised unfairly, it's also useful because the board get feedback about the problem, and that means that they can take action in the future to ensure that type of thing either doesn't happen again, or it's certainly the chances of it are reduced. So as I'm here on behalf of you, and staff training is one of our key membership offers, I thought I would just go through what training is available and where staff can get information about exams. So many of you members are QTVIs, and we're aware that a key area that they like to learn about is exams. We have an annual conference, and workshops on exams have always been very popular. I presented one on the use of technology in exams a few years ago, and the room was absolutely packed. We've touched on best practice for modifying exams, and RNIB and VIEW together developed an online course that education professionals can take, and this goes through the UCAF guidance that I've mentioned and gives examples of how to modify exam papers so that anything that they do in school can match up to what the live exam papers will look like. So we've had really good take up for this and very positive feedback. So with that positive feedback, we feel that we can put together a bid, hopefully, to fund for some money so we can extend that project. So to not only cover modified large print, but to develop a similar course for Braille. So that's something that we're looking at. So a lot of queries around exams are very specific to the individual. So RNIB's education team provide advice and guidance to families and professionals in these cases. So if you get any queries on exams and they're very individual to that case, then we would signpost them to RNIB's education team. And Simon's given the email address for that, cypf@rnib.org.uk. But there are more general sources of exam information and guidance that professionals can get hold of. In the first instance, some people use something called VI forums. So this is an online forum for professionals where they can share good practice and ask each other questions. So that's a really good place to go for information. NatSIP, the National Sensory Impairment Partnership, have got a downloadable document on their website, and that's got detailed guidance on, and it's a very snappy title, ensuring equal access to public examinations for candidates with sensory impairment. And that guidance has been updated very recently. So that is available on their website. JCQ themselves have got some key documents which professionals will be referring to constantly. Simon's mentioned the access arrangements guidance, and that's freely available on the internet. And there's also one called Instructions for Conducting Exams. And again, that's free to download. And professionals will be aware of those and will be referring to them when they're working out what the exam arrangements are going to be. And I've mentioned another document which is also freely available on the web, and that's the UCAF best practice guidance for modifiers and producers. So jumping around a little bit, but in response to the questions that came in previous to tonight, somebody asked a good question about the A-level STEM subjects, so the science, technology, engineering and maths subjects. So in the JCQ guidance, schools and colleges have a duty to, I think they call it recruit with integrity. So when a student starts on an exam course, then there should be some consideration given to whether they can access the exam with the arrangements that are available. And particularly for Braillists, if they're considering studying A-level STEM subjects, then this discussion around access to the exam will naturally include discussion around access to the course itself, because a lot of them have got either practical content or technical content. So in almost all cases, the answer to the question, can the student access both the course and the assessment, even the practical elements that are integral to the science courses will be yes. But whether the specialist staff that can make this happen are available locally is another question. So this is where your specialist settings really come into their own, offering these technical subjects, because they've got a team of qualified teachers across all subjects who are also QTVIs. And on top of that, they've got the specialist equipment and the skills to teach students to use that equipment. So for this reason, I've found that it's common for local authorities to look to specialist placements for Braillists to study A-level STEM subjects. I think I'm going to be repeating here really what Simon said, so I'll just summarise this, but just really a bit of context on provision of practice papers. or provision of anything really to meet need in terms of preparation for exams. This is where sometimes funding arrangements can be a little bit unclear. So funding arrangements vary across the nations, between authorities, and even between schools and colleges. And then on top of that, the support for one individual often comes from a number of pots. So this can lead to uncertainty about which pot essentially should be used for the provision of practice papers. In England, it's ultimately the local authority that has responsibility for ensuring that a learner with a disability has their needs met. And with the Education Healthcare Plan being the legal document that spells out in detail how that will be achieved, it's a really good idea, as Simon said, to make sure that provision of past papers is stated in the plan, ready for the start of GCSE courses. And in the devolved nations, it's similar. It's just that your written plans have different names. So I would recommend that you make sure that it's written in there that provision of practice papers will be needed. So we've had information from Simon on where you can get official sources of practice papers, but some schools, especially those with resource bases, will have a stock that they've produced in-house. Now, at the moment, teachers and support assistants can request and share these via VI Forum. But from one of the questions that came in for this evening, it seems that some families have got some papers to share as well, which is very generous of you. And you're wondering how to share them. So my first suggestion would be liaise with your QTVIs, and they can perhaps advertise them on the forum on your behalf. Bookshare isn't currently being used for sharing practice papers, but we are exploring this. One of the issues, though, is who's going to check the papers to make sure that they've been made using the same guidance that's used for genuine papers. So there are a few things that we need to look at there. Okay, I'm going to finish off with preparation for exams. So all class tests and mock exams are opportunities to develop strategies and skills that will enable the student to perform to the best of their ability on the day of the real exam. And these repeated opportunities over the years enable students and staff to work together to find what works and to develop resilience and put in place contingency plans. And having supported a lot of students in exams, I know how important it is to have these contingency plans in place, also so that the student knows that they're in place, so that because especially if you're relying on technology, we all know it can let you down just when you need it, and you need to have a backup in place, and the student needs to know that, so that they don't feel panicked. They feel certain that if something goes wrong, you'll sort it out. So students with certain access arrangements, such as a reader, will take their exams away from the main exam hall. And I have been in every room for this. It could be a music practice room, an office, a store cupboard. It's just what's free at the time. But this is something that students get used to as long as it's been there, they've been doing it in the run up to the exam. It's good practice for a brailleist to have any adult support that is familiar with their ways of working, but I would suggest it's sensible for this not to just be one person, because that's kind of risky. What if they got ill on the day, or they got a new job just before the summer? So it's good to have one or two people that the student can work with. And just to finish off, there was a question came in asking about, particularly about Excel, because some IT exams specify that students need to use not only the software they've kind of got used to lower down in the school, but also things like Excel spreadsheets. And students might be used to using NVDA or Narrator or something, but when it comes to spreadsheets, they need something a bit more technical, like JAWS. So JAWS is a good solution for spreadsheets. NVDA, Narrator don't work so well with them. But what I would say is that JAWS is commonly used in paid employment because it's the only screen reader that you can write scripts for to make it work with bespoke software. So if a college does suggest using JAWS, I think that's a really good opportunity to get some skills for employability. And with a single user license, that you can install it onto 3 computers, so it wouldn't cost anything to have it on their computer at home as well, to help the student get used to it. And also some of the keystrokes will be really similar, so I would probably try and look upon that as, I realise it's learning something new, but if they do it in plenty of time, it could actually represent a bit of an opportunity. So yeah, so that's all I was going to mention, and happy to take any questions.
Yeah, that was packed full of information. Thank you. There's been loads of questions come in. We do need to introduce the mentors, but we have got the time now to have some questions. And as so many have come in, I'm going to ask Sid, who's been carefully monitoring it, to start going through some of the questions. Have you been able to kind of put some together, Sid?
Yeah, we've had about 1 billion questions.
Yeah.
So thank you everybody for getting involved. I'm not sure if this question might have been answered. There were questions about past papers sort of being available across the board in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland.
Oh yeah, Wales, there's a link to the past papers from WCEA on the document that's WJEC on the document that's sent through. So the Welsh exam board there, Northern Ireland, the CCEA, there's a link on the document. I've just been onto the SQA, the Scottish Qualification Authority. The range of papers, modified papers, is a little bit different in Scotland. There's 14 point, 18 point, 24, 36 and 48 point available in Scotland. There's only one exam body. So if you want the past papers from those exams, you go directly to the SQA website and download them from there. They've also got Braille transcripts in Duxbury and Braille documents in Duxbury, which you'd need Duxbury to open, and then Braille transcripts in Word, PDF, sorry, not in Word.
Were those different exam boards listed in your document as well?
Yes, the Welsh and the Northern Irish boards were. SQA isn't, but you just go on to Scottish Qualification Authority, so SQA, and they host the past papers on their own website, and you can download. You just type in SQA modified past papers, you can get the modified past papers directly from SQA.
Thank you. There were then a couple of questions about functional skills exams. Can you get past papers for these? Do the early opening rules also apply? And where can we access past papers for those?
You wouldn't need the early opening because they are produced in the same. They will produce modified papers. So the exam boards that you order the functional skills papers from will produce modified papers because they're a live exam paper. In terms of past paper, this was asked at the exam update session, and I've got an answer here from one of the exam board members of staff. She said that functional skills papers are not available as past papers. This is one of the OCR, I think. They're on-demand tests, and they're taken from a pool of exams. So if a person takes a paper and then needs to retake another paper, they select that other paper from the pool of papers. So they're all in constant use and they're all live exams. So they don't make the past papers available. I would say speak to the exam board and see if they can give the QTVI can speak to the exam board to get the way that the papers would be modified to produce their own.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just pick up a question that I think I might be overstretching it here, but I think I can probably answer one that I just spotted.
Yeah, so, please do.
Ellen has popped in the chat clarifying what help QTVI or invigilator can offer a student during an exam if an error is found. They've been told nothing can be done at the time. So yeah, I mean, obviously it has to be, it has to be specific to, so it's going to be case by case, individual basis, and the exams officer, the subject teacher, and possibly the QTVI if they're on site will decide what to do in that particular instance. but as general guidance, you wouldn't try and find a way around it. You would just report to the exam board that what the mistake was, what marks the student couldn't access because of that mistake, and then you would just move on. And the reason for that is because if people like the invigilator, or I mean, it isn't the role of the invigilator, but if people start helping the student, the exam board then don't know what help, how much help has been given, so they can't give them an accurate mark for that part of the paper. Whereas if you just go to them and say there was an error on this question, the student couldn't do it, then what they can do is they can just disregard those marks from the paper. So proportionately the student is marked basically on the rest of the paper. So that's kind of the reason for it. And so that is generally true, that they shouldn't offer help if there's an error.
Thank you, Jane. Awesome. Okay, so there was a question about how do we get hold of tactile diagrams for maths when it comes to the sitting mock exams. How do we get hold of past papers tactile diagrams?
The school would be able to, so any past papers, any Braille past papers and tactile diagrams come along with those as well. The exam boards have agreed to make those available if they were produced for a live series, and the school will order those either directly from the exam board or from the Brailling agency. It's slightly different for each of the exam boards, but each of the exam boards have said that they will make those available. And also RNIB are doing some work, and if there are none available or very few available, making more of these available to be used as past papers.
Well, thank you. Okay, there's a question here that says, how do you find an exam centre that will sort out exam access arrangements if you don't go to school and wish to sit an exam as an independent and private candidate?
Well, centres should, I suppose you'd need to apply to the centre to be taken on as an independent candidate, and centres will take on independent candidates. I know in the past centres have tried to charge for those access arrangements, which is not, they're not allowed, they shouldn't be charging for access arrangements. Those access arrangements should be in place. So yeah, I suppose unless Jane's got any more information, I think just apply to the school and say, I'd like to sit these exams as an independent candidate, and then talk to the school about the access arrangements that you would need. They would probably need the evidence, or they would definitely need the evidence, just to, obviously they'll have a JCQ inspector come to them at some point, and they'll need to give the evidence of need for those access arrangements to be in place.
Yeah, so I'd just add to that really that I suppose those situations are going to be quite individual, and they might be the type of situations that you want to maybe seek individual guidance on. So that might be something you email the RNIB education team for just a bit of guidance on that.
Okay, is there a deadline to apply to access arrangements and to secure extra time?
Yes, there is, for any extra time or any access arrangements. It's this year, it's the 21st of March. That's when the school exams officer would need to make an application on access arrangements online for any access arrangements. The modified papers are ordered on the 31st of January. So any access arrangements, 21st of March.
Oh, that was simple. Thank you.
So even access, for below 25% extra time, they would still need to make the application access arrangements online, but would get automatic response. Above 25% extra time, then they would need to get into a conversation with the exam board. But yeah, it's still the same date, 21st March.
Can I pick up another one?
Yeah, go for it.
So Daisy's just asked if the exam timetable is heavy on certain days. Can adjustments be made to the timetable? So there are regulations around this, you know, in terms of the maximum recommended time that a student would sit exams. So the first thing the school should look into would be rest breaks. And then the next thing that they need to look at, if the exams go over a certain time, and it's slightly different depending on whether it's GCSE or GCE, then adjustments can be made to the timetable. So one of the exams can be sat the next day, even if it's a Saturday. I've been into a school on a Saturday morning to do an A-level exam, so that was delightful.
The students love that.
Yeah. Oh, she did. And especially because she had to be technically under supervision all the time in between, but that only really means that parents sign something to say that their child hasn't had access to the internet or been phoning friends or anything like that. So yes, the timetable can be adjusted to make that manageable. Yeah.
Oh, good question. Thank you, Jane. Yeah, I have to say I'm on my document that I've been noting everybody's questions up to when I started on this document. So if I've missed any that have come in more recently, I apologise.
No, that's fine.
Okay, so we have that one. Okay, so
right, just to intervene, we've got about 5 more minutes before mentors, and then we'll have another little time for everyone's questions. So
I'll say that I'm going to pick up one more. I've just seen one.
Please do.
I'm picking the easy ones so I can leave the difficult ones for Simon later. So Vicky's asked if education healthcare plan needs to be in place if you're requesting large print papers. No, it doesn't. So all you need to have in place is evidence that the candidate's normal way of working is with large print, modified large print papers, and then you can request them.
So just evidence that it's needed, basically.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that it's their normal way of working. Yeah.
And a QTVI could write a letter to which the exam centre keeps on file for JCQ inspectors for things like that.
There's a few questions around, you know, the whole thing about mainstream and about QTVIs not always being available, and so I guess we can't go through them all, but would you recommend, so there's one that stood out for me about photography GCSEs and the practical element, and there's a bit of a wrangle going on. So would you recommend contacting your team and seeing if that family could get some individual support?
Yeah, definitely. cypf@rnib.org.uk. Yeah, contact us.
Yeah, I am so aware that we can't answer everyone's questions, but that they're all really valid, and it's just a snapshot of the kind of just the reflection of kind of time and energy, and as parents we sit and worry a lot about this. So yeah, everyone contacts. The RNIB are going to get inundated.
Yeah, there's been a lot of questions around accessing Braille past papers and difficulties with that. I'm just looking for what else. There's one question. Son has nystagmus and struggles with spelling. Finds spelling very difficult because of the VI. Can considerations be made?
Yeah, so I can take that one if you want. Yeah, so that would be, you know, whatever's in place as their normal way of working to help them access learning with that issue, that would transfer into access arrangements, or kind of vice versa. Their normal way of working should reflect any access arrangements that will be available, and the two should work quite closely together. So it would be the QTVI working with the subject teachers to develop that effective way of working, and then they can apply for that as their normal way of working for an exam. So I mean that is very individual, so it would be guidance around that one individual child. There's no kind of blanket regulations for that. So again, that will be quite an individual situation, but they should be able to come to an arrangement that works between them.
Thank you. Now, my suggestion is that we hear from the amazing mentors, and that maybe Simon and Jane, you can have a quick look through the questions while we hear from the mentors, and if there's anything you can resolve or kind of reflect on at the end, that would be amazing. So and we knew when we set this up we couldn't answer everyone's questions, but we were going to do our best, and perhaps at the end as well that we could reflect on kind of where we go forward, and if there are ways that the parents and families can kind of support the RNIB and kind of try to change some of these situations as well. So yeah, I will turn to Amber. So Amber, I sent you all, hopefully you got them, little introduction to our mentors earlier when I sent you the link. So I'm delighted to introduce you to Amber. Amber, would you like to just say hello to everyone, and then I can ask the questions we've got, because Amber just wants a bit of support.
Hello everyone, nice to technically meet you all. I'm hoping I'll be a bit of use to you all, as much as I can anyway.
Thank you. So Amber, what eye condition do you have? Because I think that's always very fascinating for parents to know.
So I have nystagmus. I've had that since birth. I didn't get registered visually impaired until I was 14 years old. They just thought I was clumsy and kept falling down the stairs and not being able to see things properly. And I then realised that I've got restricted peripheral vision, no depth perception, and photophobia. They haven't yet diagnosed like a specific eye condition. I think it's more something to do with my brain rather than my eyes itself. So that's not a very straightforward answer, but
no, it's good. I don't think any of our children are straightforward. Brilliant, thank you. So what type of school did you attend that didn't believe that you had a visual impairment?
Mainstream school, believe it or not. It was the biggest one in my county as well, so that probably didn't help matters. Like example, like I got given a symbol cane when I was first diagnosed, and my head teacher came up to me and thought it was a sword and told me that he had no visually impaired students in his school. So you can guess what type of stories I'm possibly now going to come out with.
So yeah. Did you have any support?
Yeah, luckily the sensory support team in my area, who were the people that actually got the ball rolling, they came up to do a test, like a dyslexic test, to see if I needed like coloured paper, and she noticed that I was suddenly sort of turning quite far to sort of look her in the face, like she was sat next to me, and she just went, "Amber, can you just put your arms out for a second and tell me when you can see them, like bring them towards you?" And then I got to pretty much directly in front of me. She was like, okay, I see there's a problem here. And then from that day forward, yeah, they were my sword in the battle. They got laptops, got me seen by the low vision clinic at the hospital, and yeah, they fighted every corner for me throughout my last like 2.5 years of school.
So did you have a statement or an educational healthcare plan?
No, because it was so late, they basically didn't. And back when I was at school 10 years ago, it was the statement.
Yeah.
And but it was quite difficult, I think, to sort of get a statement that late on. So I sort of had to trial my way through sort of without the statement, and sort of having to keep hammer on at the teachers, like I need to sit in this seat in the classroom. Can you please print my stuff onto paper? And ironically, when my sister, who's 3 years younger, got to GCSEs, all her stuff was in large print, and she's fully sighted. But yeah, but once I got to college, I then got a learning plan, which made things a whole lot easier.
Yeah. But it's amazing that you left school with anything. So what was your experience of sitting exams like?
So my teachers failed to do the deadline. So my first exam was a science exam, and they just managed to get in time for me to be able to have the early, so they got the early open and photocopied my paper, because the print I needed at that point, size 18 minimum, and obviously it then came out as like 16, so I unfortunately failed that GCSE completely, also because I didn't have things in place. I was in a room full of dyslexic students who were all getting read the same paper all at the same time, so it was very sort of overwhelming. Like, I wasn't used to having support in class or a reader, and I realised afterwards that I'm a visual person, so I need to read things to be able to understand, take it in. Eventually they did get better, until I came across my maths exam and the diagrams were completely in the wrong format, which then I was then thinking when I was listening to the others, we did have to go through special arrangement for the maths exam, because it, like, nothing added up. Like, my reader was like, but that doesn't make sense, and like it'd be like, please refer to like part A of your diagram, and it'd be like a diagram of a triangle, like 3D or triangle, and actually like on this paper it was like a square, and it was like, how is this matching up here? But yeah, that did work well with the requesting it back, because they did subsidize my paper, so I actually didn't lose marks on that one, which was good.
Good. Yeah, it's just amazing. I loved Simon's kind of the timeline, and if that had been followed for you, things might have been different. But
might have been a bit more smoother sailing, but
yeah. But you kept going, didn't you? So just tell us what you went on to do at college.
So when I went to college, I again, my ears perked up when I heard the word photography. I did my photography exam. I sat it. This is the only exam that I sat with my entire class in the same classroom. But I managed to, which was quite funny, because we had the fire alarm go off 3 times in the 8-hour exam, and that's 8 hours without extra time. And so by the end, because obviously I had 50% extra time at college, because I have a mobility problem as well as my visual impairment. So they gave me 25% for each. So I had like an extra 4 hours at the end where I was in the room by myself, and my obviously my reader, and then if I needed them, and then the examiner. I did science in English again, passed them, and then I did a further year of business BTEC. So I've done all the possible ways you can do an exam, I think, and I've just and then after that I decided that I didn't want to do business, didn't want to do photography, and did a level 2 and level 3 MVQ in health and social care as an apprenticeship through the NHS. So, which was a whole entire another like exam ball game all on its own.
But you've got those, and you're working. And how was the support there? Was it very different doing the MVQs?
I mean, I think the support, because I'd gone through the disasters of school, the slightly more better hope at college. So by the time I got to sort of the apprenticeship, I was like, right, okay, I know what I need. I know what they need to do. I need that it sort of was okay. I was almost telling my tutor, right, okay, now you need to apply for the extra large print, and now we need to make sure that I've got 50% extra time. And it's like
brilliant. Yeah.
But yeah, like, work was definitely a lot more supportive, and it was a lot more easier to sort of understand things in a practical sense. For me, like, as I said, I'm a visual person, so sort of visually seeing sort of a question, like, or being able to sort of refer to, oh yeah, I did that with a patient like the other day, was a lot easier, rather than sort of the theoretical terms of like doing a science paper at school. but yeah, and it was just trying to get rid around that sort of stigma of. The hardest thing was just getting rid of the stigma of like working with a visual impairment, but that wasn't too difficult, I don't think.
Brilliant. And what are you doing now?
I am currently a OT assistant at the at another hospital, and then I'm soon to be going on paternity leave, but shortly after I'm going to hopefully be doing my full degree as to become a qualified OT, doing another apprenticeship as that's just been rolled out as an option.
Brilliant. So your exam challenges have taught you've become an incredible advocate for yourself. You've got a little boy with another baby on the way, and actually, yeah, I just think, yeah, hats off to you, because you've found your way, haven't you, despite really not the best beginnings. So yeah, well done. Thank you for sharing. We'll move on to Azim, and then I'm sure people will have questions for you afterwards. So yeah, thank you, Amber. You are brilliant. Hi Azim, how are you?
Evening. Yeah, not too bad. I was just going to say, you guys are definitely invested in this exam stuff to be on at this time of night, because I won't lie, I'm falling asleep.
Yeah, well, we're parents that care, Azim.
Big respect.
So are you happy to I can ask the questions, but are you happy just to talk about your experiences of school and exams and what you're doing now?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Azim, based in Rochdale, just outside of Manchester. I'm 23 now. It was only last year when I completed my master's degree. I myself was born with a visual impairment, so got no sight in my right eye and light perception in my left. I was heavily reliant on I wasn't heavily reliant. I'd said I was supported by the people around me in an amazing way that allowed me to go through mainstream primary school, secondary school. I did my GCSEs, and all went well. Then went and studied my A levels. I studied law, psychology, and economics. They were just in general, it was a tough time in terms of like the step up from GCSE to A level. But it was one of them where the graph definitely paid off. I ended up finishing with full marks in 2 of my A levels and a B. Then went on to study at the University of Salford, studying business and sports management. 3 years of my undergrad were very, very interesting. I was alongside my studying, I also am very lucky to play blind football for the England blind football team. So during my uni, when I was doing my undergrad, was when I started kind of playing internationally. So to be honest, a lot of the time I wasn't really there, but I was there in spirit, shall we say. But I got through 3 years and did my dissertation and everything, and ended up with the first class. And then lockdown came, had a bit of a panic, and I didn't really know what I was going to do in my life. So I did a panic masters. I didn't turn up once. Everything was online, and somehow got through that as well, and got a kind of distinction in that as well. So that's my kind of educational journey. In terms of kind of exam specific, I used to have kind of be in a separate room, rest breaks. A lot of my exams I used to kind of dictate, so I used to talk and someone would write. In terms of kind of diagrams and different things like that, the kind of the exam, they'd send like a little pack alongside it. I just kind of came into my mind, they'd send a little pack of this and this, and to be honest, I'd just say like just give me an explanation, describe what it is, and we'll kind of, I'll just make my own picture of it in my own head, because some of the stuff they'd send were just honestly, they're just so confusing. I remember one time I did a PE GCSE, and it got to the point where they sent like a tactile picture, and I had no idea what was going on, and my the invigilator or whoever was sat with me just ended up making me stand up and just putting me into the position of what the picture was. And I was like, yeah, now I understand. So it was little things in terms of that would kind of help me to get through. In general, obviously, exams are a stressful period, and being with a visual impairment, it makes it that slightly more difficult. The biggest thing for me and biggest thing to bear in mind is, you know, people talk about stress, people talk about, but everyone's going through stress. It's not a kind of a specific VI thing, but a specific VI thing for me is strain. And little things like just mental strain of time being sat in one room with four walls, and then especially when it's back-to-back exams, you know, it's added strain. When you're doing like double, I used to get 100% extra time, and it was just felt like it would go on and on and on. And I think, you know, doing that back-to-back, whether it be for your GCSEs and your A levels, it's a tough time. So having kind of mechanisms in place for the young VI people where they can kind of rest properly and recover properly during them periods, or they can turn to a hobby or something that kind of allows them to relax is so important, because I just remember the strain and the drain was quite kind of full on. But apart from that, you know, having a good relationship with the school helps, and being in there with someone who understands you as a person, and with a kind of an invigilator who from the office is kind of quite supportive and understands, you know, that, you know, there's you're not very kind of in terms of what you need isn't very complicated, but sometimes you just need that little bit of understanding where rather than kind of as a battle, that little bit of understanding of things may not be perfect, but I think hopefully if you've got good people around you, that helps, because the worry is the biggest part. Is the paper going to be ready, or is it going to be right, or are we going to have a room that's kind of just me sat in there, or are we going to have rest breaks that are appropriate, or different things like that? Sometimes that's the biggest stress. So and that shouldn't be a responsibility for the VI person to worry about. That should all be taken care of. But you know, that's an ideal world, and we don't live in one of them. So I think you know, that if that responsibility and that burden can be taken away off the visually impaired person, they just worry about just the exam, getting through that, giving it the best, and that's the most important thing, I'd say.
Thank you, because I know we are going to send everyone the top tips that we are compiling. But one thing you said that really struck me was, yeah, that, you know, look at exams or support your young people to think, well, they're just a way of showing your knowledge off, and, you know, just keep it really low key. And yeah, because actually as parents we have a lot of responsibility for kind of keeping our young people calm and supporting them. So brilliant. So I'm going to get everyone to do kind of last words of wisdom, but it's lovely to hear just how you got on with it and how successful you are. So thank you very much.
Can I just throw in one question that was specifically aimed at Azim?
Yes.
Just about the 100% extra time, because actually I don't know the answer to this. Did the extra time continue into uni level after GCSEs and A levels?
So obviously when you go to uni, it's slightly different, because you get, and it is a bit of a pain, but usually you get student finance support. So that's from an external agency that comes in, and you have something called a RAP, which is a reasonable adjustment plan. So within that, my college were really good. Is when they went for a DSA assessment, they took kind of evidence of this and this needs to be put in place, or when they spoke to the university around what adjustments I would need when I go to university, they showcased what I have at the minute. And as part of that, it was like, okay, Azim's got 100% extra time, he needs a reader, he needs a scribe, and he needs a separate room and things like that. So getting that in right at the start when that transition was happening, similar to what you do when you're going from high school to college, same from college to university, that 100% time did continue. And to be honest, it should be quite seamless in terms of everything that you should have from high school should be at college. Everything you should have at college should be at university.
We all want the support you have for our children, but it's really good to know you had it. It's really brilliant. So we do have one last mentor, and then you can ask lots of more questions if you'd like to, but Lara's here. So, and I'm so grateful because Lara's a very new mentor to the Look family. So she's come to share her experience. Hi, Lara. Thank you. Last but not least.
Hi, so I'm Lara Green, she, her, and I'm sort of got sort of light perception, a little bit of vision, with optic atrophy, diagnosed at 3. In terms, it's been sort of really interesting to hear kind of the process involved in getting the exam adjustments, etc. Because in terms of my experience as a pupil, I feel like I had absolutely amazing support, and I was generally not particularly aware of the support that was happening in the background to get sort of what I needed in place to showcase my knowledge. And I think the less stress that your sort of children and young people can have in that space, I think the better for them. I think just as far as possible, a reassurance that kind of you will get what you will get what you get, and that hopefully that is fair, and there will be processes in place to kind of get special consideration if that's needed, or you can if needed sort of retake exams or do things in a different path, and no one's sort of path is linear. So I think kind of your kind of role here is to sort of to be the sorry, I was just joined my cat. Your role here is to be the parent and be the parent or the carer and give your children that support and that sort of guidance that any sort of young person needs to sort of encourage them to revise, to get them to sort of do their exams, etc. So in terms of my support, I was really fortunate to have a statement and I had the same teaching assistant from 4 to 16, and then went to a sixth form college with really good experience of supporting vision impaired pupils. So I think that kind of, I appreciate not all pupils have had that kind of really good educational experience. I'm obviously speaking from that backdrop. I suppose my first memory of doing exams was in terms of doing sort of year key stage 2 SATs, and I think the thing that I most remember is sort of going into a room, using a braille and having braille questions, and feeling quite sort of isolated from the other pupils. I think because I generally hadn't, I mean, I'd had some time where I was taken out of class to do specific work, but I hadn't really had that experience of being like, they've all got the experience of going into the hall and I'm doing something different. So I think it felt quite a different experience for me. I think I was given the support that I needed to do them, but I think as I would have probably been helped by having more preparation before the exams on what that experience would look and feel like, and maybe practice, as people have said from a TVI perspective, practice doing it in the same environment. I think my sort of results at that stage sort of were a bit of a sort of, so like I'm probably more of a maths rather than a written person, but my English scores are much better than my math scores. I don't know whether that was practice doing the exams or whether it was just kind of, it's easier to do those sort of, easier to adjust those written questions. I then did GCSEs at a mainstream school. For the most part, so do my GCSEs, I sort of used it predominantly braille questions and a mixture of a Perkins Brailler and a I think it was then a braille note taker. In terms of doing those GCSEs, I was given sort of I had 100% extra time and predominantly did the exams with either my teaching assistant or a TVI supporting, and I think that was throughout my exams, that was seen as sort of particularly important for things like maths and science-based subjects where there was sort of more practically that needed to be done. I won't say that the process was 100% of plain sailing. Like, one of the experiences that I really, really vividly remember is opening up a French exam. I was doing a French listening in a separate room using a Perkins Braille, and the first question, I'd listened to the first question, didn't make sense. Like what they were talking about and the question didn't match. It's like, maybe I just don't know my French. The same was sort of then true with the second question, and I said to the invigilator, like, I don't understand this. There's something really like wrong here. I don't know what I've got. The questions aren't matching the answer, and they were like, well, keep trying. And I sort of tried the next one. I was like, no, this really is not right. And I was like, oh, I remember at the start of the test when it sort of played the information, it said, oh, this is the tape for the intermediate French paper. And this just popped into my head, and I was like, this is the sort of tape for the intermediate paper, and I'm doing the higher paper. So they sort of went into a bit of a panic. But kind of throughout this, like, once kind of I felt quite reassured. I don't know what had been done to give me that confidence. Once people started, I obviously needed to speak up several times to be heard, which was difficult. But once kind of I was heard, I felt people really took what I'd said on board, and I was sort of removed from the process of sorting out the problem. So I kind of I don't know what I had to do there, but I was taken to the library with another teaching assistant kind of invigilator supervising whilst they sort of went into panic mode with the exams officer. And the conclusion was there wasn't they only had sent one copy of the exam, and I'd have to wait until it was kind of completed in the hall before doing the exam. And my memory at that point is that my TA took me on a walk, and I think we went and got like chips or ice cream or something just to kind of like do something during this period of time. So I think and then I feel like once I started to do the exam, it all went fine, and I was kind of given the support to kind of stay calm and to show my best in the exams. The other experience that I kind of really remember from those exams was coming out of the exam. It had been an English language paper, and I'd written about school dinners in the exam, and I was taught, didn't often, to be honest, see my friends after exams because of my extra time. I was kind of waiting in the kind of reception area to go home, and I saw my friends, and they were like, oh, what did you write for the question on football? And I was like, didn't have a question on football. Like, have I just completely blanked this out? Like, what's happened in my life? Like, genuine panic. And then it emerged, and kind of the exams officer sort of told me that my English language paper had been stolen from a van sort of a couple of weeks before the papers, and for sort of students without using adapted papers, they'd use the sort of paper B because of that. And for me, I'd kind of used the paper A, which had been stolen, which was really frustrating that I didn't know that in advance. Like, I could have bought it on eBay and got a bit of a heads up. But I think it sort of all went well, and sort of provision. I think kind of this is quite a good thing for young people to sort of see, is I actually really enjoyed my exams from the perspective that during school time, you're kind of, however good the teaching assistant and the support is, and however good the adjustments are, there isn't necessarily the ability to have the time and consideration to give you the extra time to do the work, or things move on in the classroom at a sort of cited pace. So kind of it takes a hell of a lot longer to explore a tactile diagram than a print diagram. I felt very confident that in my exams, one, those diagrams would always be produced rather than sometimes having descriptions, sometimes having it drawn on German film, sometimes having it sort of hotspotted. So like all sorts of different options were generally used in class depending on what was needed, but a kind of quick and dirty to get you the best you can. Whereas in exams, I felt like I had really good provision. I then moved on to studying A-levels. Then I moved to using electronic electronic equipment. So I think I used a Braille note again for those exams, and Braille questions. And then for my maths-based subjects, I completed them using a Perkins Brailler. I was sort of really fortunate to be able to, and I shouldn't say that I'm fortunate because we should all be able to do what we sort of want, to be able to be in a sixth form where there was a TVI who had experience of kind of maths and mathematical Braille. So kind of studying maths, there were its challenges, as there are for anyone studying A-level maths, but I felt like actually I had the support, and I was at a mainstream school, or sixth form, but actually two of my teachers had previously taught VI pupils, and so they had that awareness and that confidence, and I think that transferred to confidence amongst other tutors at the school. And I remember feeling sort of really happy at sixth form in the sense that I had a really close group of friends, and felt that we were kind of all on the same page. So that kind of experience for me was a really positive one. But again, and I also studied key skills, which I think are now functional skills in communications, numeracy and IT. I honestly didn't really think of the adjustments for those papers, and I can remember there being a thing with the school on not really knowing, or sixth form not knowing kind of how some of the communications would be adapted, and whether some of the visual elements would be adapted according to the kind of expected guidance and things. I can't remember any problems doing the paper, so hopefully that means they were adapted properly. And then in terms of A-levels, did history, law, politics and maths and general studies. Some of the time there were some challenges, like I can remember in terms of the general studies, there were questions about kind of looking in your mirror whilst driving, which was kind of a maths question, but it kind of, there was a certain amount of visual knowledge that kind of, it was quite an easy question for a sighted person to complete, but it was challenging for me. My thing on doing those questions was, I can do what I can do, and I will, if there are problems, I'll flag them later. Can't remember whether I did or didn't flag it, or whether it was raised to the exam board in terms of special considerations. But I think that ability to sort of stay calm, focused and just get on kind of was really useful.
Brilliant.
I did have a period of time where I had one day with 6 hours of exams and the next day with, well, it turned into 6 hours of exams and then 8 hours of exams. I had an overnight at my teachers, because I wasn't allowed to kind of do the just sign that you can't use online provision, and that was honestly like really strange to be taken away from like an ability to speak to anyone and kind of being in an unfamiliar environment when you're doing exams, and knowing that actually the next day of exams would be an 8-hour day, so that was in itself tough.
Yes.
In terms of managing those long exams, I think I feel like my mum always used to say, like, you can have like you can pick one item for breakfast for each hour of exams that you get, and I feel like that as a thing made it feel like quite fun, because you'd be like, what else can I have if I have pancakes and this and this and this? Like, I don't really want all these items, but it just kind of made it feel like sort of a bit of a game. And I think they were also quite good in kind of preparing like snacks and things to take for my breaks during exams, which kind of just made it feel like my parents were sort of caring for me throughout the process, which I think is your role as a parent carer, like to kind of give that support, that reassurance, and to obviously advocate as much as you can, but to be there to give your child the comfort of their experience.
Brilliant.
And I then went on to do, and in terms of can you get a top mark if you have adjustments? Yes. So I got 5 A's at A level, and in terms of my government and politics exam, I got a top 5 mark in the country for that. So yeah, you can get those marks. The thing that honestly really, and I don't know whether anything's changed in that regard, I think potentially it has with more online systems, really sort of felt really hard for me in that process was on results day that I went to the school and was given a letter with a slip of paper in, and I couldn't read my own results, and it was a friend that read them to me. And like, honestly, I'd have liked my results to be in the format that I'd done my exams in, just for that kind of ability to know myself. I then went on to university. I was at Oxford and studied philosophy, politics and economics. In terms of my exams at Oxford, almost the least said the better. In 7 out of my 8 exams, the computer crashed and lost data. But it was kind of, again, those resilient skills of kind of getting on with things. And it ended up kind of being subject to a sort of major inquiry of how there were such problems in my exams. And I understand that that has led to Oxford sort of changing quite a number of their processes as a result. I came out of my exams with a 2-1, so I'm satisfied with the overall result was fair. And hopefully my experience will help your children.
Brilliant.
And I think the best thing that kind of my parents would say to me in that process with those problems, they'd be like, it's character building, Laura. And I'd be like, that's the only character I want to build, but yes, it is. Since then, I've worked in insurance, and I now work for the Bank of England, and I've done professional qualifications and had the same level of support with those.
Brilliant.
I would say in terms of extra time, to be sort of really mindful that level of extra time the level of extra time its need may change over time. So for me, I needed a lot more extra time at sort of school, and the younger I was, because I wasn't as familiar with kind of making the adjustments, and with my professional qualifications, I didn't honestly need, I needed it for the written exams, but I didn't need as much extra time. And to be really conscious of being guided by your child's needs. So we did a test at Oxford whether it worked better to not use a computer and type it, and to whether kind of having an amanuensis or a scribe was a better way for me to do my exams. Honestly, for me, I couldn't verbalise my ideas and write an essay in that way. So I took the risk of the IT. So just being flexible, my top tips would be to be flexible, give your child that resilience, and field a space to be a parent carer who nags his children about exams and is at home to pick up the pieces when things go wrong.
Oh, thank you, Laura, so much. I think we were all on. Yes, yes, so lovely hearing your story. I'm gutted because we've only got about 4 minutes left, but I wonder, we probably don't have time. Has any other questions come in, Sid? I thought it'd be nice just to conclude quickly, or maybe all the panel members can just do a top tip.
I think hearing from the mentors has just stunned everybody into silence. There's been a few messages of admiration to all of you guys.
Yes.
And
yes.
Yeah, just really impressive. Yeah, and there's thank you messages coming in now.
Yes. So Simon, Jane, shall we quickly just say what a kind of summary of what we've talked about today? So and Azim and Amber, it'd be lovely to hear from you. Laura's top tips were great. I would say from my point of view, as parents, you are amazing. You're there trying to hold on to your children, kind of all that anxiety about things and how they're going to be there to give them cups of tea and biscuits, and go to your allies for support, because you can't hold it all on your own. We've heard that RNIB will support us, which is really good, and we do want to carry on sharing stories because we want equal access. But as somebody said, it is kind of how the world is. I think it's what Azim said. So we've just got to try and deal with it the best we can. So Jane, have you got anything?
Yes, I'm just gonna speak from a sort of viewpoint of view. Oh, I'm even on it at this time of night. So yeah, so I think it's all about teamwork and work along with your QTVIs, and if your QTVIs feel like they would like to find out some more about exams, then just point them in the way of view and we'll see what we can do.
Brilliant. Simon?
Yeah, it's lovely to hear from everyone, all the mentors and all the great advice from everybody, especially to hear from Laura that processes are in place. That's what we like to hear. I know it's a really stressful time for all children, young people, but it's also a really stressful time for parents as well. So just reassure, stay calm, work with the school, work with the QTVIs to get the best possible outcome for the students, and then let us know if you need any help or advice.
Thank you. Amber.
Yeah.
Warrior Amber.
Yeah, my advice is just make sure that your child just knows it's not the be all and end all, that this exam it's not going to define their lives as much as their teachers are probably hammering it into them. And yeah, just sort of remember that exams for anyone is tiring, let alone having to have 25% extra to 100% extra time on top of that. Can make it just as much of a challenge, even more of a challenge. And yeah, lots of cups of tea. That'd be my take home from this chat.
Thank you, Azim.
I'd just say kind of in terms of the exams themselves, I think we kind of plaster up exams to be this really kind of scary, kind of frightening, horrible time of the year, but to kind of implement that way of thinking with your kind of kids or the students that you work with, to show it, to kind of change that perspective to more as an opportunity to everything that you've learned so far. You've got a couple hours now to just splash that on a piece of paper and then you're done with it. So I think if we could change that mentality, I think that will make a big difference. And a bit of reflection, as long as you know that you've done everything that you could in terms of making the exams accessible, and then the young person doing the exams to the best of their ability. I can't do any more than that.
Yeah, thank you very, very much. We have finished virtually at 9:31, so I'm quite pleased with that. Have a good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming.